the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
That's a lot of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
That's a lot of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And hello, and welcome to HBR Talk 246. No, there's not an 8 after that. We interrupt the whammoning of the women for this broken news. I'm Hannah Wallen here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren B., and we have recently been informed that despite everything, men are somehow still not doing enough for the whammons. But before we find out from feminists what they think you've got to do, well, we've got to do what we've got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platform, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. Before we get into this week's show, we had a super chat from last week that for some reason didn't show in my feed until after I closed out the show. So, and this is even though it was not a last minute post, like, I go to close things out and boom, there's a super chat from Albatross for $10 who said, without the concern of having to monitor or protect yourself, how does having abortions this easily, or does having abortions this easily available encourage sexual addiction? Zero boundaries means you can chase highs nonstop. So, ... And I have to agree to an extent to that, because it does, like, if you have a safety net, and I've said this, in terms of like the financial safety nets of welfare and things like that and more, if you have a safety net, you may have a tendency to engage in behavior that is risky that you wouldn't engage in without that safety net. And if your safety net is something that takes something away from you and you don't realize it, you spend that something freely without understanding what you're giving up. And with financials, it's your freedom. And women have done that. Women have given up a shitload of freedom in America for Gibbs. And I actually like that term, because it basically is. It's like trick or treat, only the trick's on you. You think you're getting something great, but you're not. And when it comes to abortion, there are serious ethical considerations that women are ignoring. And it's not that I'm saying that everybody who ever has had an abortion is automatically the devil. But you do lose something of yourself when you make the decision to kill for your own convenience. You lose something of yourself, even if you have rationalized, this isn't a real person, I can do this because it's not immoral, morals don't matter, it's not bad. Somewhere inside, you are aware that you are taking a human life that isn't in the process of dying. And it's damaging. And like, so yeah, it's bad.
Because we all because nobody would want to be treated in that way. Right. So we all have that. You can't escape it. And that switch that they flip off when it becomes, just like you said, a killing of convenience. It's so scary to watch them rationalize that. Do unto others as you want done to you, right? But it's like a completely lost cause on these people.
Right. And I've been to powwows where there's been discussion about the difference between the way tribal people hunt and the way self-titled modern people hunt. And I grew up with hunters that were more like tribal people, where you are stewards of the hunt, right? And you only take what you need, and you pay your respects to what you're hunting. And Native Americans actually have prayers of thanks and respect to animals that they've hunted, specifically for that reason, because the way they value life is it's very deep and spiritual, and it's deep and spiritual in regard to all life, not just human life.
Yeah.
And we've gone in exactly the opposite direction, and we've gone overboard in modern society, modern civilized society, where we throw away life like it's tissue paper, and we engage in war on each other like it's a game, and we kill our own babies, and we throw away our old people, stuff them in hidey holes that we call care facilities, where they don't get the care that they deserve. They get the minimum care that you can give and keep them alive and milk them for money. Right?
Talk about being marginalized.
Yeah. And so we've lost a lot, and I fear for the later generations because of this, because they throw intimacy in like it's nothing, which goes to the sexual addiction thing, which can be very damaging to the person, and then they throw life away like it's nothing. What are they going to do to our generation when our generation is nursing home age?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to have a place?
No.
Or are they going to euthanize us all? Because that's where we're headed. Right?
Oh, they're trying. That's what they're doing.
Like, they've already started in Canada. Oh,
Yep.
you're depressed? Here, we'll offer you suicide. Right? It's just, you have chronic pain, you can go kill yourself. Like, what? When did we start that? Which, the answer is in the 90s, the 1990s.
Yeah, and it's gotten more aggressive as time goes on, because now it's, if you don't take this experimental jab, you can't have a life.
Yeah.
And
The lethal injection. I would say that we are begging for a whole shitload of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Richard asks, do you think you will be able to stop working? Not me, personally. Like, in my family, retirement is death. We retire, we live a few years, and then we die. Like, I will not stop. I will figure out something. Even if it's just writing and publishing and fundraising for my writing and publishing and stuff, I will do something until when I can't anymore, then I'll be ready to die. But I don't think most of Generation X, like, either they've got their own very solid plans for retirement, or like me, I don't plan on retiring.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't know. So I don't relax. So that might make it, like, I don't get bored, and I don't relax. So I'm good at looking relaxed, but I don't actually do it.
Yeah.
So retiring's just not. But I'm not a Capricorn. I'm a Cancer. You might not like me at first, but I'll grow on you.
Yeah, I unlike you, I can't see. I can't see retirement. Like, I just think it's never going to happen for me.
Yeah.
That's just, the way it feels in my mind, but of course, eventually we all slow down and settle down. But God,
Yeah.
I just keep going, and I feel like when I'm at work, I'm all over the place. I'm all over everything, because I firmly believe in, if you see a problem with something, you fix it right then and there. You don't just put it off to the side, because that's when things get forgotten. And it takes more time to deal with something. If you would just deal with it in the first place, you'd be done and then not think about it, When I come home, I'm completely the opposite. I'm like, look, I'm not getting up. Kat, you need some food here. I'll pour something in a bowl. You just gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
it's funny. I when I come home, I work.
Yeah.
And if I have days off, I stuff other kinds of work into them.
Yeah.
I can't help it. I've always been like this.
Yeah.
And when I was a little kid, a lot of my play was games about work. Unless somebody else came up with the game, and then I would do what the other kids were doing. My brother was good with that. But if I was the one coming up with the game involved baking something or cleaning something or building something, or creating something to use later. Like it with the sewing, no relaxation. The only time I ever got close to that is when I was reading a book, and I do that so hard that I lose track of everything that's going on around me, and you could run a train over me and I wouldn't know it. But speaking of reading a book, we have this article. We have an open letter from 100 whamons groups. Supposedly,
why do you need 100 fucking women's groups? I mean, Jesus Christ! If there's any indication that you women can't get this shit together, it's the need for 100 fucking groups dedicated to your cause. But this is exactly what we saw with the Vice Feminist panel, right? Because it's all a bunch of women just talking at each other and saying, "Well, I'm this, and you not looking at me for my disability." They can't come together to form a consensus around the serious issues that need to happen or be taken care of.
What blows my mind,
it's unbelievable.
What blows my mind is, all right, so we have legalized, legislated equal pay. We have the laws that feminists asked for, to protect specifically women from intimate partner and sexual violence, even though that happens to both sexes. And we've even got laws that protect women from being held accountable if they are perpetrators of intimate partner and sexual violence. We have laws that give women the same financial rights as men, freedoms and so on, the same working rights as men, and we even have affirmative action for women for the workplace, so that women don't have to be qualified to get the same job, to actually be hired into it. They don't have to be equally qualified or do equal work to get equal pay. They just have to be able to put together enough evidence for a lawsuit, right? We have anti-sexual harassment laws. We have women's ability to show as much skin as they want. There's pretty much all of that is covered. We have 41 different types of birth control for women, one for men. Unless you want to count actual surgery on the body, then there's 2 for men, at least in Western countries. We have all kinds of initiatives for girls' education, women's education. We have housing for women that is just for women. Some places have travel that is just for women. We have funding for women going into business. We have funding for other women's initiatives. That is state funding. Why do we need 100 women's organizations? What are 100 women's organizations fighting for? Like, what's left to demand? And the only thing I can think of is abortion, because they've already got everything else. And in the United States, they're fighting for abortion to be far less restrictive than the nations they're using as examples of unrestricted abortion. So even that's a mess, right? What exactly do they have to fight for women specifically, and not for everybody? And we even have whole systems set up to protect women from the consequences of their own sexual choices when they don't use the other systems that are set up to protect women from the consequences of their own sexual choices.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have safety nets for women who jump out of the fucking safety net.
Ridiculous.
Like, what else are they gonna fight for? What do we not have?
I don't know.
And it's like the names
know.
and the names of this. One of them's called 9 to 5.
Oh.
But we have, like, okay, vote for choice. Hashtag vote for choice is number 1 on there. 9 to 5. Abortion Access Front. Well, we know what they're fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
Access Reproductive Cares Southeast. Advocates for Youth. The AFL-CIO is now a women's group. Just a women's group. Women's organization. Oh. This is news to me.
Yeah, right?
I thought they represented both sexes. Yeah.
As long as both sexes include women, you know.
All Above All Action Fund. What the fuck? Alliance for Girls. The American Association of People with Disabilities is not a women's group.
That would be every single person on this list.
Honestly, though, like, that's not a women. That is a genderless group.
Right.
In fact, by nature, it should be almost a men's group, because disabilities actually hit more men than women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, I know feminists consider being female a disability, like,
yes.
but that's, you know, American Association of University Women. What the fuck is Bands Off Miami?
I don't know.
It's probably
saw
an
that.
abortion thing.
Yeah, some anti-Ron DeSantis.
Yeah. Some of these are definitely communist organizations. Community Justice has to be a communist organization. I don't know, like, Family Values at Work. Okay, that's probably a right-wing feminist organization. Those exist. There's a bunch of these that say choice, or there's different states' national organizations for women in there. Girls Who Code.
They got Esperanza United. They got the Latinas in there. Representation. Okay.
Grandmothers for Reproductive Rights. And then in parentheses afterward, it says, grrr. You know, we old women, we gotta be grouchy about things, right?
I'm a woman, hear me roar.
Yeah.
Grrr.
Grrr. Oh, jeez. This name is really short. In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda.
Oh my God. How is that different from the Black Women's Health Imperative?
Well, these guys aren't fighting for abortion. They want the cops to go in and arrest the baby.
Oh. Jesus Christ. But you see what I'm saying? Like, there's so much overlap. I mean, seriously, you got to condense this down into something more palatable, ladies, because I don't care to read through. Like, do you think that anybody's going to click, "Ooh, what's this? Let me figure out what Institutes for Women's Policy Research, what are they up to? What's IPAS? IPAS? What the fuck is that?"
That one I don't know.
And so, like, who is looking into these things? Who is part of these organizations? And again, what the hell are they even doing besides whinging online?
Yeah, like, more than half of these organizations are just pro-abortion organizations. Like, that's the main title of... But then you also have the DV grifters, like National Network to End Domestic Violence, which that shouldn't be a gendered organization because domestic violence actually happens to both sexes and both sexes perpetrate it, so there's no reason why that should be gendered. You have other organizations that should not be gendered in there. Monsoon Asians and Pacific Islanders in Solidarity. I don't see anything about women in that. Do they not care about Asian men? Asian men can, like, go eat grass? Is that it?
Oh, it's like the Titanic.
That's probably why, they are doing it.
Monsoon Asian. That sounds so fucking racist. I'm sorry.
It wasn't my idea. I didn't name the organization. They came up with that themselves. So
Monsoon Asian sounds like basketball Americans. Like, you all know who we're talking about here, people.
Yeah.
Let's stop being coy.
So there's a group called Plan C, which is about Plan B. This one's called Power to Decide.
Because third time's the charm, right?
Plan
C. Jesus Christ.
Plan C, I think, is about being able to get abortion pills online without a doctor's order and stuff. Ultraviolet action. Good grief. And down there at the bottom is the Women's March, of course.
Oh, I love this one. The meteor. Is it the sweet meteor of death, please?
Yeah, the meteor. It's when they don't like what you're doing, they jump out of the sky and hit you on the head.
And ruin your entire life, your existence.
Move over, other women groups. Now there's something meteor. Oh, jeez. Okay, so now
that was
we should really not focus entirely on this, but I mean, like, okay, so now that we know who this is from and what their ideals are and stuff, let's take a look at. I've been looking at this on my other computer. I'm gonna actually go through the article in the window here. I'm gonna actually increase the size of the window because it's smaller than it needs to be. Meteor, yeah. And we're just gonna... What the hell? That's not what I wanted to do. Trying to get it to go that way. There we go. Alright. And as Congress convenes, it says, over 100 women's groups urge lawmakers to focus on gender equity.
Oh, God.
That's why they're doing the gender equity thing. And also, I would like to point out that someone actually made this graphic on purpose this way. For real. Like that was... Somebody designed that. Just... like...
Very lazy.
Yeah. Somebody thought that was a clever design.
One of these bitches skipped a class on learning how to code.
Oh, code nothing. That's just graphic design, and it's... I would have thought it was passable, like that. Oh, I could get away with this, when I was in high school journalism, and if I'd have been in a rush to create something for publication that, like, I didn't really have time to get it done, I'd have been like, well, I'm sorry, this is the best I can do. And my teacher would have been like, that's fair, you only had 5 minutes.
Yeah. This thing looks like, what's the point?
Yeah. This looks like they dropped the graphic and it bounced and left an extra imprint behind itself. Like, sad. That's just sad. So, alright. Enough of that, though. Sorry. Just from the perspective of someone who used to do ad layout and design, like, I hate that graphic. I really do. It's sad.
I mean,
pathetic.
you could have even chosen like a snazzier font. Come on, man.
And
God.
before we actually start reading, I am going to address one other thing, because I don't want to get a bunch of super chats about this. So I have Anemic Royalty gave us $4.99 and said, I haven't watched any HBR in a long time, but I'm sad to hear about Brian's health. I know this is nothing, but I hope it helps. Praying for you all. And I wanted to sort of make sure everybody knows I don't have any information right now. Allison's going to be the person to contact on that, because she's going to be probably the first that'll hear anything. But I don't think they're doing a fundraiser tomorrow, because Brian's the one that usually runs the fundraiser, and I don't know what the upcoming schedule is going to be. So don't do super chats asking me for information, because I won't have it. But well wishes obviously are quite welcome, and we're all, of course, just as worried as you guys are, and praying as hard as you guys are, and hopefully Brian's going to be okay. So, and like I said, I don't have any new information, but hopefully we will soon. So that's basically all I can really say about that. I wish there was more that I could tell you, and I wish I had better news, but I don't. So I'm sorry about that.
Godspeed, Brian.
Yeah, and it sucks, because like I was saying before the show, like I'm used to, when something like this is going on, figuring out a way to run to the rescue, and there's not a way for me to do that in this situation. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of the people that we're listening that are listening to us have the sort of the same history of running to people's rescue in their lives, and or being the doer, and this is a situation where we just have to wait. Yeah. So I'm with you guys on that. But we'll go ahead and get into the article here. After we've made fun of the graphic there, which and their comment, we deserve leaders who prioritize gender justice. Like, I'm just over it. Like, gender justice. What the heck is gender justice? Are we going to arrest all of the men now because patriarchy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll stop at the first half of the sentence. We deserve leaders who... You don't deserve anything. You vote for who you want, and if you happen to have if that candidate's claims, if his campaign is good enough, then he'll get the votes required to win. You don't have to. You don't have to like push the envelope on this. You know what I mean? And but obviously, if your ideas worked, then you wouldn't have to push for this. But this is what they're doing.
Well, and they're also not asking for leaders. They're asking for legislators, which is a different thing altogether. Yeah. Right? A leader doesn't lay down the law and say, this is what you're going to do, and or else I'm going to, arrest you or have you arrested or whatever. A leader does, and then people are inspired and they follow. And then they work as a team, and the leader is the coach. And unfortunately, we have this misconception in modern America that our politicians are somehow our betters. That we should be looking up to tell us how to live our lives. And it's bullshit. The whole point of our government in the United States is not to decide how we live our lives. It's to facilitate.
Exactly.
It's to, and what have we got? We've got a business that runs on telling us how to live our lives now.
Exactly. And I'll add on to that, justice is supposed to be blind.
Mm-hmm.
There should be no preference of gender, one over the other.
Yeah.
You know, so this whole thing is just falls flat on its face off this from beginning.
Exactly. So here we go. Congress is back in session, and feminist leaders are making clear gender equity must be a priority. Notice they've got to say equity because equality already happened.
Yep.
A coalition of top women's rights and reproductive rights focused groups outlined their vision for the future of U.S. gender equality and the steps the 118th Congress can take, in a letter sent to leaders in both the U.S. House and Senate, as well as relevant committee chairs.
So these are the top women's rights groups.
Yes.
This is the cream of the crop.
Yes, this is the
Alrighty
cream
then.
of the crop. Notice that when you are contacting your politicians, you write to the furniture as well. Sorry. The letter outlined 5 focus areas for congressional action. Number 1, health, reproductive freedom, and bodily autonomy. Freedom. It's like, reproductive freedom, like men have.
Yeah, exactly. Don't you already have that? I mean, I feel like I'm going to be saying this a whole lot during this article. You already have it. What are you complaining about? You just want to be able to do whatever the hell you want, whenever the hell you want, and fuck it, I can't pay for it, so the government's going to pay for it. That's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, okay, so first off, you start with health. Point me to the doctor who won't see you because you're a female, or isn't treating you properly because you have some kind of, you're on some kind of spectrum of gender identity, you're fluid or whatever the fuck. That it doesn't happen. And if it does, again, the legal precedent has already been set. You have if you are discriminated against, then I think you have some legal recourse there.
See, this is the thing. Women have been complaining, feminist women, especially abortion advocates, have been complaining that if a woman wants her tubes tied and she's young, she can't get that surgery. My answer is that's illegal. It's age discrimination. If you are told that a service will not be provided to you because of your age, get a lawyer and file a lawsuit.
Right.
Like that's a real and the other thing that I've got to ask about that is, right, we've got this organization that's been dedicated to women's reproductive choice for 100 years, that's existed in the United States for 100 years, that is very heavily focused on providing certain types of surgery and has been doing so for decades. Why don't they also offer tubal ligation for women, no matter what age they are, that request it?
Right.
I mean, so my solution for the issue of women not having the choice at the age of 20 if they want to have tubal ligation done, it's fine. You won't do the tubal ligation because of my age, then you can have tubal litigation.
Yeah.
I sue.
Yeah.
That's like that. Duh.
Exactly.
But they don't take that action to defend their rights. They just whine about it and say, "Well, we need abortion because we can't have tubal ligation done." Like bullshit.
Yeah. Standing up for yourself is too hard. That's how they became pregnant in the first place. Oops, I'm pregnant. But. And then so it,
you mean some guy picked on them and they took it lying down?
Yeah. Oh my God, Anna. But even if the legal recourse is too much of a task for you to take, or you don't have the finances to hire a lawyer, yada yada, go to other doctors. There's more than one doctor in the phone book. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I've heard, plenty of men complain about not being able to get a vasectomy. They go in, the doctor tells them the same thing. You're too young, you might change your mind, yada, yada, yada. And I've heard guys had to go to several doctors before they would find one who would perform the surgery for them, or the procedure. It's not really surgery. So, you have that option too. But again, it takes more legwork to do. And we just can't have women doing that kind of work, can we? No.
Yeah, and it's really sad because like that would solve a lot of problems, and it tells you their priorities too, because these organizations, these pro-abortion organizations, had initiatives that were just, hundreds of thousands of women involved in these initiatives, these networks to help women go from state to state to have abortions when it's illegal in their state, networks to perform abortions underground, like the I don't know, the underground slaughterhouse, but they couldn't come up with an equivalent for women who want their tubes tied, but the doctor thinks they're too young. Right? Bullshit. I call bullshit. If you really cared about women's reproductive choice, there would be a network for women who want their tubes tied when they're young.
Exactly. But they don't. It's not a coincidence that they don't even acknowledge the other avenues, right? They don't acknowledge it. They these abortion activist groups, they won't tell you that, if this one doctor won't do this for you, hey, maybe you go. Nope. The answer is always, it's your legislators that are at fault. It's these old white men in Congress who are passing these laws. They're controlling your body. It's just all this blame shifting.
Yep. So, yeah, that reproductive freedom, and the reason I said that, like, men, obviously, like, MRAs know, but anybody that's listening that's not an MRA, you think about the reproductive options that women have, right? Women have the option of being taken seriously when they say no. That's the first right out of the chute. When a guy says no, if a woman overrides that, his objections aren't taken seriously, whether it's overriding no to sex or overriding no to conception. If she engages in birth control sabotage to get pregnant against his will, a lot of women will treat that as, well, she was just helping him grow up, right? She was just helping him make a decision. No. That's you making a decision for him, against him.
Exactly.
Right.
These pro-choice people, they're all about. They're not about choice. They're about only the choices that women want to make.
Yep.
That's it. That's the only choice that they care about.
And that takes away his bodily autonomy.
Exactly. It is really hypocritical. It really is. I'm sorry. If I would never take a pro-choice person seriously if they didn't honestly address these issues. But they don't.
Yeah. And then on top of, if he's in that situation, what happens under the law? Because if a woman is in that situation, right, if a man forces himself on her against her will, she has legal recourse. She can go to the cops. She can go to the hospital and get a rape kit done to prove that it happened. And they take her seriously. They treat her with compassion. It's an awful situation and an awful experience, but everybody involved is gentle with you. And when they're not, they're looking for evidence to get the person that did this to you. And, you have this situation with men where when a woman forces herself on him against his will, or uses drugs or other means to take away his choice, he gets ridiculed. He gets treated like he's less of a man because this happened to him and he didn't stop it. And he gets treated like his sexuality is in question. And the veracity of his objections maybe you really didn't object that much since you couldn't stop her, right? Or, maybe you're gay since you didn't like it.
Right?
Or if he is gay, well, maybe you're not gay since it happened, And it's like, when I thought, we're in a modern world now where being gay isn't used as a weapon against a guy, but guess it is in this situation, right? And then it goes on. If he's raped, his baby's born into the custody of his rapist, and he has to fight to change that, or it stays that way. The custody stays that way. And if custody does remain with the rapist, she can go after him for child support. Right. So, no woman faces that. Women don't have to give birth after a rape if they don't want to. They can have an abortion. I don't think it's the most advisable thing to do, but it can be done. They have the choice. And a woman who is a victim of rape can prosecute, and if her rapist is convicted, he can't have custody. She can use safe haven abandonment, and she can also use the adoption system. And so this idea that women don't have reproductive freedom and somehow men do, which is what abortion advocates say, it's bullshit. And it starts with bodily autonomy. But they go on economic security for women and families. Not for all people, just women and families. Men don't need or deserve economic security, apparently.
Yeah, no, see, and then the minor children who happen to be male get lumped in with the family grouping, right? So
until they're teenagers, and they got to get a job.
Exactly, and then you've got to find your own financial security.
Yep, and this is another one that really grinds my gears, because, financial security for me has always been me getting a job, me paying my bills, me getting a second job if it's needed, me selling things if I didn't want to go out and get a second job. Like, I've never made my philosophy on financial security about depending on other people. Right? When I fell down to the point, like, of needing to rely on the system that is set aside for people that are down on their luck, I got out of there as fast as I could, because I see that as a sandpit trap. Right? That is like quicksand. You got to get out of there as quick as possible, because it will trap you forever if you don't. It is the swamps of sadness. It will swallow you alive. And so for me, this idea that women uniquely do not have economic security, like, the most secure thing that you can have in terms of your economic status is being able to rely on your own skills, your own initiative, your own diligence, your own work ethic, your own versatility, to be able to find ways to support yourself, being resilient, being resourceful, not being dependent on somebody else. And that's what men do. Men have always done that. Economic security isn't something men have ever had. They have always made it for themselves. It's never been given to them.
It's never been a choice. It's never been an option.
Right. So there used to be this thing, companies, and this started sort of with the westward rush of Europeans and stuff in the early United States. These mining companies in particular, would set up towns, and everybody either worked in the mines or they worked in the town, supporting the existence of workers in the mine. And the company owned everything. It owned the houses, it owned the stores, it owned, all of the transportation, it owned, obviously, the mine. And to get the job, you took on debt. Everything that you purchased in that town, you took on debt. You owed to the company store, you owed to the bank, the company bank, and and so on for your living arrangements, your rent. And it kept people, like, they were paid just enough to keep them from going completely bankrupt. And then they were constantly in debt, like they were not paid enough to get out of debt. And there's a song about it, with that line, "I owe my soul to the company store," right? And that is it's illegal. You can't do that anymore. Like, if you are a business owner and you create a city, a small town, and you own everything in that town, you cannot use fees for everything to keep your employees in debt to you for the rest of their lives and force them to work themselves to death, because it's really slavery, right? The only corporation in the United States that is still allowed to do that is our government, and they do.
Yes, they do.
Right?
They do.
And that is the unfortunate truth of men's so-called economic security and women's economic security. And every time women demand that our corporate government fund something, it's at the expense of men's labor and men's debt and the
lives.
debt of their future sons and grandsons and great-grandsons. Economic security. What they're asking for is slavery.
Yeah.
Right? So number 3 is politics to reduce gender-based violence. So I didn't expect them to admit that 50 years of activism by domestic violence organizations and other feminist organizations has been completely ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, that is such an L.
Right.
This is women posting their L's, the congressional version. Like,
right.
What the fuck have you guys been doing since the 50s? Actually, 70 years. 70 years of blaming men and shaming men and demanding laws and demanding those laws be gendered and demanding those laws fund fake research and demanding those laws fund community initiatives and creating organizations for women to move out of their homes and divorce their husbands and get custody of their children, and like total failure.
Mm-hmm. And now they're going right back to the well, begging Congress again.
It's like, we've been working on this for 70 years. We got 100 organizations working on this for 70 years, and we got jack and shit done.
Yeah.
Do something for us, men's.
It's like Joe Biden, fucking 50 years in Congress, but now he's going to save the economy. Okay, potato. Go have a nap, okay, Grandpa? Ay.
This is an admission that what they're doing is not working.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the next step is, all right, why isn't it working? Well, they're not gonna want to talk about that.
No.
Because then they'd have to admit that female violence is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Next, we have democracy reform and voting rights.
What?
So, can you name the group that should legally be allowed to vote in the United States that faces legislation preventing them from having the right to vote?
What? I'm stuck. Democracy reform. You want to reform democracy into what? A slightly comfortable version of communism? What the hell is this? You want democracy reform? No, bitch, democracy works the way it's supposed to. Everybody gets to say what they want to say, and then The representative group gets that representative for the. I just don't understand what these people don't get. It's like, I'm sorry. You got invited to the party, or this is the wrong analogy, so don't even. I'm not even gonna go down there. But it's like, you're mad because you didn't get picked for the right team. I don't understand. Like, listen. This is something that I think that very many people need to learn. It's not called fair. It's called life, right? Sometimes things happen that just don't go your way, right? You get into a fight with somebody's going to get the worst of it. That's just how shit goes. You know what I mean? You got to learn how to take your lumps and move on. These people are incapable of that.
Yeah. I just want to point out, let's see, where is it? I'm like scrolling back. There's Saltpeter Taffy. Got the answer correct. Felons. There are states where felons can vote, and there are states where felons cannot vote.
Yep.
And there are plenty of things that it is fair to not allow felons to do while they are in prison. And there are plenty of things to say, if you commit a particular type of felony, you lose the right to, particular activities because we can't trust you anymore, right? So, for instance, if you commit a crime that's violent and you're using a weapon to commit that crime, then you might have to have a period of time, even after you get out of jail, if you get out of jail, where you can't use a weapon. That's fair. But voting is a citizen's right. If you don't lose your citizenship because you become a felon, if you don't get deported to some other country, and you're a natural-born citizen of the United States, or you're an immigrant and we retain you as a citizen, that should include voting rights. Even if you've done the absolute worst possible things you can do. Because voting rights are a civil right that should be respected for all adult citizens.
I agree. If you've paid your dues, like if you served your time and you're out, I don't see why you shouldn't then be allowed to have a say in the people who are still governing over you.
Yeah.
Just now on the outside instead of on the inside.
Well, and honestly, I don't object to voting rights even in prison. I think that that's fair. If people who are citizens of the United States should be able to vote in U.S. elections, regardless.
Yeah.
And the discrimination against people who have made bad choices, and ended up in prison. Or people who have been falsely accused and ended up in prison, because that happens as well. That usually hits men. The overwhelming majority of convicts are men. The overwhelming majority of felons, in particular, that are convicted and imprisoned, are men. So, this is a gender issue, but not to women. It's a gender issue that affects men. Women have no discrimination that we face in terms of voting rights. We don't have any political discrimination against us at all. We are free to run for office. We are free to vote. There are initiatives specifically to persuade us to vote specific ways because we are a huge voting bloc. And to be honest, I don't think we earned any of it.
Nope.
So, men had to earn it. So yeah, democracy reform and voting rights, not a women's issue. Immigration reform, also not a women's issue. Right? Like this is another. You can look at we had to do this when we went through the Women's March talking points. Most of the hardships that affect immigrants, particularly migrant workers, hit men in larger numbers and harder.
Mm-hmm.
Men are more likely to be, if they're illegal laborers, they're more likely to be used, really exploited, in ways that cause injury and death, and in ways that are severely underpaid than women. Both sexes get exploited as sex workers. Both sexes get exploited as laborers. Both sexes get exploited as drug mules. Both sexes get threatened with the safety, danger to the safety of family members if they don't comply. Both sexes get kidnapped and dragged unwilling across the border. And there are both sexes that are trying to escape terrible situations or improve their situations that want to get across the border in large numbers. So, and both sexes are exploited as children in all of the same ways as adults.
Yeah.
Right? Both sexes are murdered. Like, there's not something about immigration reform that needs to be done for women that doesn't also need to be done for men. So I don't know how that's a gender issue either.
I'd love to see it. It looks like they kind of go into it when they break down what's in what's actually in the letter. So,
yeah. Organized by non-profit United State of Women. United State of Women. Like, when the fuck have we been united over anything? And signed by over 100 allies. The initiative is designed to meet the U.S.'s moment of crisis. Did you know we were in a moment of crisis?
I mean,
in regard to gender issues?
No. Like, I can think of many crises that are going on right now. But gender inequality wasn't one of them. Sorry, didn't make the list.
So I guess the real deal is when the women crisis, the men Gibbs. A nation reeling from the loss of abortion rights at the federal level. Oh, God, could you get any more dramatic?
Oh, God.
A once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and historic levels of discrimination and violence. So, apparently all of history didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm sorry, but there's just no comparison between any of the things that feminists have complaints about today and the various groups that have had complaints about discrimination and violence throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they could go talk to people in the war-torn Middle East where two sub-sects of a huge religious movement are murdering each other and murdering each other's families and discriminating against each other over fine points of doctrine in their religion, their same religion.
Right.
Before they decide that here in the United States we are facing historic levels of discrimination and violence.
Well, I mean, listen, if you count the microaggressions, holy shit, I would agree. I would agree with you there. Congratulations for getting the most losing points.
Yeah. This is like women posting their L's on crack. Well, and I suppose somebody had to sit down to type this up, so there you go. They are on crack. At the same time, the letter echoes the latest progressive victories, nationwide wins for abortion ballot measures, and pro-choice candidates in the 2020 midterms. Gee, it's almost like Roe versus Wade was kind of irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. They don't get it.
Higher than ever majority support for reproductive rights, and a growing collective of Americans who won't stand for the status quo.
Is.
The letter proposes several solutions to help safeguard women's rights and the rights of marginalized people. And they have a list, including protecting abortion providers from criminal penalties, passing bills to tackle the U.S. maternal mortality crisis. Something like 76 out of every 100,000 women are listed as maternal mortalities. Maternal mortality is if you die any time between conception to like a year or so after the birth from any cause, whether it's directly related to the pregnancy or not. So there's your maternal mortality crisis. Expanding the child tax credit, in other words, getting men to pay for women's reproductive choices. Leveling the economic playing field for women workers of color through passage of the Paycheck Fairness Act. The Paycheck Fairness Act, by the way, is like if you look at equal pay right now, the equal pay law says if I'm a cashier and my husband is a cashier at a gas station and we work the same hours on the same days, we both work weekday second shift, they're not allowed to pay me less. Unless they can prove that he does work that I don't do and takes on hazards that I don't take on. And even then, they have to really fight for the right to give him pay that I'm not getting.
Yeah.
Right? So even with performance reviews and everything, they have to be really careful about paying anybody less. And that's fair. So what the Paycheck Fairness Act does is it says if my husband's the manager and I'm a cashier, I have the right to make the court examine his job and examine my job and see if I'm doing as much work as he's doing and pay me accordingly. So if I claim that my labor, like say the manager has to do the financial figuring out of, at the end of the day, I can't think of what it's called, reconciliation at the end of the day. But I have to clean the bathrooms and take out the trash and change the trash cans out by the gas pumps in the cold. Then the court might decide that I have to be paid as much as a manager because I'm doing physical labor the manager's not doing, and the manager's doing a different job that they consider to be equal in effort, even though anybody can take out the trash, clean the restroom, and change the cans out by the pumps. But it takes a particularly trustworthy and reliable person to reconcile all of the financial information at the end of the day and be trusted to say, not fuck it up, not not steal from the company, not cover for somebody else that's stealing from the company, be consistent, show up on call if I call in sick, and then do those things as well that I would have done. But you can't pay somebody more for those things because they're intangible.
Right.
Right. And that's basically what paycheck fairness is about. So paycheck fairness will be used to take away your hazard pay, to take away your weekend and shift differentials, to take away your overtime incentive, to take away your dirty job incentives, to take away your hard job incentives, to take away your boring as fuck job incentives, that nobody will do this job because it's boring as fuck, right? To take away all of those things that companies rely on to get people to do jobs that nobody wants to do.
Right.
And all of a sudden you'll find that there is a major shortage in workers who do those jobs. So that's paycheck fairness. And they go on, ensuring better funding and support for sexual assault survivors. So now I could see funding for organizations to support recovery, but I think we already have that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether they're going to pay people to be sexual assault survivors, because that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, I can see, you get assaulted, you go to the police examine your case, they get evidence, they charge the assailant, and the assailant is tried in court and convicted. You sue the assailant so that you can make the assailant responsible for your medical bills. Like, I can see the court being empowered to say, oh, you did this to this other person. Every expense that can be directly attributed to the experience that you inflicted is now in your name.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's fair.
Yes.
I would agree to that being fair. But I don't think the taxpayers should have to fund it.
No.
Right? If Susie, the teacher, gets crazy, I guess. You'd have to be crazy to do this to a kid. But if Susie, the teacher, molests one of her male students and he has to go to therapy for 20 years, Susie, the teacher, should have to pay for that therapy.
Mm-hmm. Out
of whatever money she can earn from whatever job she's doing. And, if she's in jail and she owns a house, her house should be sold.
Yep.
If she owns a car, her car should be sold. Like, that's fair. But, Bob the taxpayer in Minnesota should not have to be paying through the federal government for therapy for some stranger in Ohio.
Right.
Right, that's not fair. He didn't do anything to that stranger. So he shouldn't have to. Now, if he wants to donate to an organization because he cares, that's his right. And it benefits him to do it because it gives him the power to help somebody, reach out and do something about a problem. And that's an achievement, accomplishment, right? That's fair. But the federal government shouldn't take from people and to do that. It takes away your power to do something for somebody else and be the hero.
Yeah, because it becomes less, it changes the nature of the thing, right? It's not charity if you're forced to do it. If I want to do something for someone, it should be my prerogative. It shouldn't be me held at, not literally held at gunpoint, but it shouldn't be forcefully taken from me.
I think it is held at gunpoint, if you really think about it. I mean, what happens if you don't pay your taxes? Who shows up at your house?
Yeah, that's true.
First you get the IRS agents, showing up with, their paperwork and everything. But if it continues, you get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get arrested, you are at gunpoint. If you try to resist, so yeah, you don't get a choice in that matter. Then it goes on, passage of the Freedom to Vote, John R. Lewis Act, which I actually never heard of until just reading this. So I don't know exactly what this is. Like, I
yeah, that's a new one for me too.
The only thing that I know what's been discussed publicly in regard to voting rights, and that is the idea that if you make voters prove who they are, that they are citizens of the United States, and that they haven't already voted once, that you're discriminating against people of color. Because apparently everybody but people of color can do those things. Well, I kind of find that insulting to people of color. So if that's what the act is, then I don't support it. Now, if they want more locations where people can vote, but they don't want to take away from the ability to confirm that everybody's only voting once and that everybody voting is a U.S. citizen, I'm all for more places where people can vote. That's fine.
Yeah.
Right. I don't like the idea of more mail-in voting because that's easier to manipulate. It's easier to falsify. But initiatives to get people out in person, yeah, that's great. Like getting people to the polls, getting people honestly, if they're really upset about the ID thing, then the initiative should be how to make it easier for people to get a voter ID.
Mm-hmm.
Not how to make it so people don't need one.
Right.
Like if I'm gonna pay taxes for something, like I don't like paying taxes for anything, but if I'm gonna pay taxes for something, I would much prefer funding for a system that made it cost nothing for the citizen to obtain a voter ID. Like, financially speaking, like as long as they can prove their identity, as long as they can and I wouldn't care if the process was made cost free. Fill out a piece of paperwork that says I'm doing this to get my voter ID, and yeah, you have access to your birth certificate, you have access to your social security number to get that information, and boom, you get your voter ID and you can go vote. Like that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's probably one of the most important things if we're going to have government funding things for our government to fund. I would much rather we fund stuff like that than some of the things that we are funding.
Definitely.
But, and I don't think it would have to be a very active system, because I think most people get the kind of IDs they need for other things, like so they can go to school, so they can get a job, so they can get welfare, all the other things you have to have IDs for. I think most people have something that they can use. So it would just basically be to help the people that would fall through the cracks because of their economic situation, like homeless people.
Right.
So, yeah. But, yeah, I bet that's probably not what this is. And finally, publishing the Equal Rights Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. That's interesting. They didn't say ratifying it. They didn't say passing it. They want it published.
Mm-hmm.
Read the full letter below. Here we go. As our country continues to grapple with and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic instability it caused. No, it didn't. The government caused that through its reactions. Women, people of all marginalized genders, and their families continue to bear the burden of that recovery.
Men and people of all marginalized genders. Sorry, I had to jump in.
Please do.
While you guys were talking about the article, I was sat here reading this letter below, and I thought the letter can't be as bad as the article. But
oh God,
I hope you're not going to read
worse.
through this whole thing. I hope you don't read through this whole thing.
It's going to take
long.
us a couple of shows, but we will.
It's so fucking stupid. As you've already covered, the COVID-19 pandemic, it just affected women more, just like the fucking meteor. How? Yes. They don't even go into how the fuck it affected women more. Is it causing women below 40 more heart attacks than it's causing men? I don't believe it is. I've seen a lot of evidence that it's affecting men of a lower age more problems than women. Of all the examples I've seen of male athletes dying suddenly on the field, weirdly enough, I haven't seen any female ones, even though at this point there's just as many female sporting events going on, even in the public eye.
It's definitely it affected men more, and this, it's documented. The virus was more infectious toward men, and the side effects that have been documented have hit men more. The only one that has been discussed in regard to women is reproductive, and the only reason that we have more information about it affecting women, I think, is because it's easier to document that. And something that affects us for a longer time, because we only make one set of gametes, and then we just dispense one every month for the rest of our fertile lives. And it's so much fun. But
as we all know, when men die, women are the primary victims of that.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Well, you see, the pandemic infected our wallets, which by which I mean your wallets. You know, like, that's basically like how women treat men in modern society, and I think how women have always treated men. It's just we're not doing it as I don't know, as openly. Like, we don't acknowledge it as much that this is what we're doing, where historically it was openly admitted that women were doing this. Modern times, we use the phrase taxpayers to pretend that we're not talking about men. But yeah, women have the philosophy, what's ours is ours and what's yours is ours, right? That's basically how women operate as a gender. And any of us that don't want to do that, not only do we get it done on our behalf without our consent, even if we vote against it, but we also get lambasted for objecting to it. So yeah, but yeah, we're gonna go through this whole thing. We might get through the first couple of talking points on it tonight, and then next week we'll continue with it, because this we have to pay attention to this stuff. This is what these organizations are doing in women's name, and politicians listen to them, not because they're moved by what these women are saying, but because everything they're asking for is job security for politicians and job security for government bureaucrats.
Yep.
So, but yeah. So basically, when COVID-19 came in and infected our economy, people of all marginalized genders, I like that. That basically means everyone except except heterosexual cis white men.
Yep.
And they go on to exemplify that in the next sentence,
Yeah.
and the next paragraph,
Yep.
and all of this fucking letter.
Making matters worse, we continue to see historic attacks, physical and legislative, against women, the LGBT, the alphabet community, immigrants, people with disabilities, and people of color.
This is, as they say, the best form of attack is a robust defense of something, and I wish people could see through this. Oh, yeah. Look! All of these people are being attacked. Everyone's being attacked, except straight, white, cisgender, heterosexual men. That's you attacking this one group by pretending they're the only group not being attacked.
Yep.
Why can people not see this? It's like you can neglect your children if you can't afford to feed all of them. But if you have 9 children, you're feeding 8 of them and you're keeping one in the doghouse and letting them eat nothing but grass. It's pretty fucking obvious that you're attacking that child through neglect, which is exactly what's happening here.
Yeah, and it if you look at this, right, so they're saying, again, historic attacks, physical and legislative. So what did I list off at the beginning of the show? All of the things that by hook or by crook through the government, men do for women. Right? What historic attack are we experiencing? Because we are getting the opposite. We're to the point where if a woman attacks a man, she's protected against the consequences of her actions. Like, not only are we protected against violence, not only are we protected against legislated discrimination against us, but we are beneficiaries of legislated protection of our violence, legislated protection of our discrimination against men. And, not to be crude, but who is attacking people of color? The most attacks that are happening to people of color are coming from other people of color. Right? And
depending on what you call an attack, like I said, the best form of attack is defense and vice versa.
Yeah.
The bigotry of low expectations.
There is
it doesn't seem like an attack the way you phrase it, but ultimately what it does is diminish that particular group of their ability to fend for themselves. And if that's not an attack, I don't know what is.
Politicians that are angling for that, most of them are grifters who are at the top of the food chain of demographics of color. Right? There are white people that are doing it as well. There are white socialists, right? But they are advocating for that for everybody. But when you look at the grift that demands like special dependency initiatives for people of color, it's people of color making that demand. And I think it's a matter of, if I ask for, if I pretend everyone else who is like me is weak and helpless and I have to protect and provide for them all, I get to be on top. And I think that's really sick and twisted and dastardly, but I think it's happening, right? I think that's what's going on. It's heartbreaking because I know historically there were a great deal of advancements that, like, by the time I was in high school, a lot of what we historically saw as conditions caused by discrimination had been alleviated. We were seeing great leaps and bounds of, like, people having economic benefits of the discrimination being eliminated and so on. And these grifts cropped up, and we ended up with this massive welfare state that should never have happened. So, I hate to say it, but women are women's worst enemy, as far as the grift goes. And grifters who are grifting on behalf of women really are women's worst enemy. Grifters who are grifting on behalf of people of color are people of color's worst enemy. And the only way that I see our society attacking people of color isn't direct. We've created a situation, a perfect storm of trapping people in poor neighborhoods, in bad living conditions, with schools that don't serve the children of those neighborhoods, so they don't get a proper education. They don't learn math, they don't learn reading, they don't understand the scientific process. They have to accept what people tell them is the science on everything, and they can be told that whatever lack of success they have is because of the man, and they'll believe it. And their situation is living in a high crime neighborhood where they're in a lot of danger from people in their own neighborhood who are in their own demographic. And there are things we could do to alleviate that, like stop criminalizing normal behaviors and start switching funding from the criminalization of those behaviors to recovery from those behaviors if they're damaging behaviors, and switch to, somebody breaks into your house and steals your stuff, yes, that's illegal. But if you smoke an herb that grows in the ground naturally, that's not illegal. Like, those kind of things could be fixed. But those do hit everybody. And it's just, I don't buy the idea that people are under attack in the United States because of their demographic, aside from men. And when it really boils down to it, it's, we have at the worst, hatred is reserved for white men, cis men, heterosexual men. But trans women are treated as men who are usurping female privilege. Gay men are treated as men who are not gynocentric enough, right? Men of color, they get treated like the white people of their racial demographic. Like men, regardless, are being targeted. I don't know. Well, one of the most egregious of these attacks was the stripping of the constitutional right to abortion.
How does that affect women more? Hey, surely men can have abortions too. I mean, the sensible questions are, how does that affect people of color more, or people with disabilities more, or immigrants more? These laws affect all of these people, and how the fuck does it affect LGBTQI plus people more, given they're very unlikely to be party to any given abortion? But I return to my original point: men can have abortions too. So how dare you be such a transphobe by saying that abortion affects women more?
Yes, and you also have to have abortion for polyamorous lesbians of color, right? I just gotta have that. Let's go with a Supreme Court decision that has already affected or impacted millions and will continue to have far-reaching implications for our country. I don't believe it's impacted very many people because, for the most part, there hasn't been a lot of legislative change at the state level. And where there has, women just go to another state to get their abortion, so it's really a moot point.
Yeah.
The attacks and risks we're facing extend far beyond the Dobbs decision.
It's so ridiculous. Like, why is it that everything that doesn't go their way turn into a fucking existential threat?
Oh, they got the existential blues. That's what it is.
Yeah, they do.
Next thing you know, they're going to be wandering around in a field of poppies. Poppies, poppies. You have to look up existential blues to understand that. It's old. You'll love it. The outcome of the 2020 midterms was history-defying for a reason. History-defying. Oh my God. It was driven by a broad demand.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Broad. To protect the rights of women and childbearing people.
Oh, God.
Like 100 years from now, people are going to be like, why did they write such redundancy into everything that was about feminism?
God, they're the same picture. It's the meme.
Yeah.
It's the same
I return to my point. If men could be childbearing people, then what does it have to do with women?
Broads. It's a broad demand. Given the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination that women and all people of marginalized genders face, in particular black women and other women. Okay, that's women. That's just black women and other women. Like, what the... These people are on crack. And gender expansive people of color.
What? What though?
That was the I think about the fat acceptance community. They did say expansive.
They must belong to the meteor.
Yes, that's it. There's
mass meteor.
Yes, we now have aliens in the women's rights movement. The 118th Congress has a responsibility and a duty to make gender equity and justice a top priority for its upcoming season.
Then maybe you should include all those people that you quite deliberately excluded.
Yeah.
Because that's surely what equity would mean, including all people and making sure they all had an equality of outcome or an equity of outcome. Is that a phrase yet? Equity of outcome?
Not
yet. That'll be the next step. It's beyond our reasoning at the moment.
Well,
but eventually they'll figure out what equity of outcome means. That'll be the
equity cartoon, right? The equity cartoon that shows
the baseball game,
the baseball game, and the three freeloaders watching over the fence instead of paying for tickets. That They portray it as equity being taking a box away from somebody who doesn't need it and giving it to somebody who does, right? But what do equity activists do? They ignore the boxes, they cut the legs off of the individual who's tall, or they put a fence up in front of his face, and then nobody can see the game.
The box causes climate change, after all.
Yes. They take away all the boxes, and they put a wall up in front of the paying customers as well, because it's not fair that if the non-paying customers can't see the game and the paying ones can, the non-paying customers are obviously being discriminated against. That's how equity works in practicality.
Right, that's economic insecurity, Hannah, right there.
Yeah,
I can't pay for the game.
Like
if I can't pay to watch the game, nobody should be able to watch the game.
In theory, there's a way of making equity work, and it's called wealth creation.
Oh yeah.
That is, you allow people to create their own wealth through work, and you remove whatever barriers that involves. But that's not how equity works here, because they're not talking about wealth creation. They are just talking about wealth redistribution.
Yeah.
And that means you can't just give them more boxes. It means you can only take away boxes so that nobody can see over the fence, which works in this analogy anyway, because you shouldn't be freeloading a fucking baseball game. It's a terrible analogy.
Right. And honestly, people who really want to see equality would come along and teach the short guy how to make his own boxes so he can build a box. Right?
Yep.
And he could start a business selling those boxes and hire the other two guys so they could afford to pay for tickets to the damn game.
Right.
They might have to start out sitting in the nosebleed seats, but they could get in there with everybody else. They might even buy a hot dog, right?
Or just don't watch Major League Baseball. Just play baseball in your own fucking backyard. Why not?
Right.
We did that at the park, because when we played baseball in our own backyard, we had to pay for Windows. And everybody knows that Windows is a shit operating system.
It brings a whole new meaning to the term NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yes.
Yes.
Like we had kids in my neighborhood that even at the park, in the baseball diamond, which the park was a whole block, and the baseball diamond had, the backstop at the corner of the block, so the diamond faced into the rest of the park, and we still had people's windows get hit. We had with some guys that could really hit, and they went on, like guys and gals actually, and went on to win state. So there you go. But yeah, like it blows my mind the way these people are. Like when you talk about being able to create your own equality and create your own economic stability. I had, in the early part of the 21st century, like 2000, around 2001, 2002, and somewhere there, I discovered a community of people who would spend pretty good amounts of money on crocheted decorations for themselves that, like, I mostly called it crochet jewelry. Like, jewelry is usually made out of metal. But this worked out pretty well. Like, I made necklaces and chokers and stuff like that I had a necklace that I called a cleavage necklace, because it literally made a V shape down into the cleavage and would sit on the breast. So you had, if you were wearing a low-cut outfit and you had lots of cleavage and you draped that over your cleavage, it like really drew attention. And gals were spending like $60 to $80 on those.
Jeez.
And all I did was crochet shiny things, beads, bits of like little baubles and stuff that are made to put on jewelry into my work. And I used actually a modified bedspread edging pattern to create these things. And they were pretty, and they were delicate, and I had special instructions, like, if you gotta clean this, like, please don't put this in the washing machine.
Yeah.
But they liked them enough to spend that kind of money. I made them sturdy so that they would last, and that, like, I might spend $5 or $10 on materials and I would make $70 to $80 profit. Now, if I had wanted to, I could have made a living doing that. What I did was feed my crochet habit. I paid for my crochet habit. And if I'd chosen a different market, because I was selling them in Lima, Ohio, where the market I was targeting in that area was at the low end of the income spectrum in that area. There is wealth in Lima that if I'd have targeted that market, I probably could have charged 10 times as much for my products, and people would have paid it at that time. So you make your own. It's called. That's actually when you invest in something, and it has an economic value that is higher than the amount you invested in it. That value is referred to as equity. The value is your profit.
Speaking of making your own, Night Motorcyclist makes the best point ever. Calvin Ball is better than baseball. If you just make up your own rules as you go along, if you just make up your own sport, you'll be amazed how much fun you have. And maybe fun is the best economical model of all.
We used to have Calvin Ball in my neighborhood, but it was called Monkey Bar Tag.
Everyone had Calvin Ball. It's where you just make up the game as you go along. It's the best game in the world. The game that you and your mates kind of just come up with. And then maybe, if it's a really good game, you can eventually turn it into a major league sport. And maybe then it eventually will have rules, but you'll have patented those rules, and you can make a shitload of money. It's called capitalism.
That would be basketball, which I think is actually played
movie.
now. I think there are actually people who play basketball now.
Including the distractions, which are, again, is a part of the rules where you can continue to make up your own rules.
Exactly. We used to, when I was a kid, we played games. You know how you always hear about kids playing cops and robbers? Like, we did not play cops and robbers. We played guns. And we had replicas of guns that, but for being plastic and obviously looking plastic, they were replicas. They were not lined with orange or anything like that. And I understand why you want kids to have the orange tip and the orange line and all that, because there are, in where I live now, there are 12-year-olds and even 8-year-olds carrying real guns that are illegal. And, like, the cops need to know if your 8-year-old points a gun and they see it, that it's not real. If it's not real, they don't want 8-year-olds getting shot. But we used to run around, and we made up our own rules with a lot of things. You had, if you got shot, you laid down for 10 seconds, and then you got back up, and you were a new character. Right? And then we had different days where you couldn't use your water pistols because those were the laser guns. And we just all kinds of stuff. We would team up. There were no cops, no robbers, no good guys, no bad guys. Sometimes it was a free-for-all. We had a blast. And we would be out in the neighborhood from, sunrise to sunset. And then we'd go in and get off sprayed all over us, and then we would go outside for another hour or two if it was summertime. None of the kids do that anymore. It's part of the reason why they don't do so well in school. You have to have a lot of play to do well in school. Otherwise, when you're sitting in the classroom, you can't focus. Let's see. So, the undersigned gender equity organizations urge members of Congress of both parties to prioritize the following policy issues. Number 1, protect health, reproductive freedom, and bodily autonomy. We already talked about why the reproductive freedom issue is bullshit. With ongoing and relentless attacks against health care, Congress must act to protect the right to access essential health care services. Well, what health care services are under attack? Have they decided to start closing urgent care centers, hospitals, doctors' offices? Like, are we legislating attacks on, like, say, oncologists? Oh, wait, yes, we are. We made it so that if oncologists prescribe pain medicine, the local DA can go through everyone's medical records and then put the oncologist in jail and therefore out of business, and you can't get cancer treatment from him because he's a drug dealer now. That's probably not what they meant, right? Including abortion, contraception, and space gender-affirming care. Like, they put that on a whole new line. Congress must also act to address health disparities and ensure access to care for survivors of sexual violence. So, which of these things is a gender issue?
Everything is a gender issue.
You know, when my mom started going through her medical journey, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, my mom had 3 different types of arthritis. She was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I think it was a misdiagnosis because she had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And like, her joint mobility, hypermobility was so bad that she could put something out of place by getting out of a chair or sitting down too hard. She had degenerative disc disease because of the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. She had such chronic pain, such a high level of chronic pain, that her neurosurgeon could not understand how she was not disabled. Anybody else in that circumstance would have been disabled, he said. Well, her medical care was so complex that to protect her from drug interactions, overdoses, addiction, all of the things that can happen when they throw every drug at you, they sent her to pain clinics instead of just having her neurologist prescribe stuff and her urologist prescribe stuff and this doctor and that doctor. Like, she had a medical team. And so you go into a pain clinic, they do treat you like an addict waiting to happen. First of all, like, it's inevitable that you're going to get treated that way because pain clinics sort of sprung up around the United States in response to attacks on the right to receive pain care. And what happened is, during the 80s, the early 80s, medical insurance companies came along and decided that if you had a condition that needed physical therapy in order to control symptoms that caused pain, like you have fibromyalgia and you need massage therapy to control muscle stiffness, or you have some other condition that causes you to need stronger muscles to prevent joint hypermobility from getting out of hand. There's all kinds of physical therapy that can be done for that. Insurance companies are like, well, we're not going to pay for that because OxyContin and Darvocet and Darvon and all these other drugs that you can take to numb the pain are way cheaper. So if you want these other things, you got to pay for those yourself. And so a lot of people went with the drugs. And so these clinics popped up all over the country because one of the big risks of relying on narcotics is becoming addicted to narcotics. And, then it's illegal to become addicted to the medication that has been thrown at you by your insurance company. It's illegal to have weaknesses, especially if you're a man. So I would accompany my mom to these visits because you need an advocate when you go to a pain clinic. You go to a pain clinic by yourself, you're asking almost to be run over and told that you don't deserve care. And it's really a sad state of affairs, but that is the way pain patients are treated in the United States. And so I go in there, and I look around, and there's one other woman and like 30 men in the waiting room. And you can tell that the men that are in there are not in there because they have a syndrome that's genetic. they've got missing limbs. Some of them they look like cancer patients, where they've lost their hair and they've got the air of sickness about them. Some of them are pretty obviously injured, like work injuries. Some of them get up and they can't stand up straight. And it's, they're in there because something has actually happened to them to cause them to be in this condition. And a lot of times it's stuff that happened at work. So again, like, yeah, this is a gender issue. Access to healthcare and pain care has been under attack for as long as I've known pain care existed as a type of care, as a separate and unique type of medical care, which would be since 1982. I know it's probably been under attack longer than that. And that impacts men more, again, because men are more likely to be injured on the job, and men are more likely to be injured in recreational activities. Men are more likely to experience injuries from repetitive motion, again,
and
on
chronic
the job,
pain from those injuries.
right? Yeah, and men are more likely to have chronic pain from those injuries. So you have both sexes experiencing like genetic conditions that cause chronic pain. But yeah, that's just they're never going to accept that that's a gender issue for men. They're all worried about abortion, and they're all worried about sex changes and inflicting sex changes on children. They don't care if men who are injured on the job can get proper health care. And what they did to pain patients during the latter part of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century was atrocious. Right? They took people who had experienced injuries or had genetic conditions that needed therapy in order to maintain the best health they could have or recover from those injuries. They denied them the opportunity to maintain a lack of need for pain medication for years, and then took the pain medication away and said, well, you should have had therapy. And men all over the country, and at least one woman I know, committed suicide. Like, that led to a lot of suicide.
Goddamn.
Yeah. And of course, suicide is a healthcare issue as well. And who is more impacted by that?
Trans people, right?
Yeah. But yeah, Congress has to make sure that women can have abortions. So their big thing, they have a whole big paragraph about abortion care. The Dobbs decision, a legally unjustifiable opinion. Really, because like the Supreme Court said it was justifiable. Issued by a court that ignored nearly 50 years of precedent. So they don't understand how the Supreme Court works. Further devastated access to abortion care. It immediately wrenched the constitutionally protected right to abortion and threatened the right to full bodily autonomy from millions of people, jeopardizing their health, safety, and financial security in the process. Access to abortion is especially essential to people with this term could put their own life in danger.
Wah.
Well, again, if you have that circumstance, getting pregnant could be deadly for you, right? Your doctor says, don't get pregnant, it could kill you. The answer is, okay, tie my tubes.
Yeah.
Because if the doctor then says, oh no, you're too young, you might want to get pregnant, you just told me if I get pregnant, I might die. Tie my tubes, right? Duh.
Or the other 40
if you're
options.
Still refused, you file an age discrimination lawsuit because you can do that.
Yep. But again, that takes work. They have to actually get up and do something about it, and that's what they're allergic to.
Like, I actually actively want to see that lawsuit filed. At this point, because I have heard from so many women in arguments about abortion. Oh, we can't get our tubes tied because we're too young. Like, I'm sorry, but you're telling me that your response to age discrimination is not to sue for age discrimination, but to fight for a legislation to give you the right to kill someone who isn't discriminating against you. Like,
but now we just change the definition of someone.
Yeah,
see?
Yeah. There
It's
you
not
go.
It's not someone. It's just some tumor that's growing inside me. QED.
Well, even then, abortion can be a more complex medical procedure than tubal ligation. It's kind of like if I had gone for a nose job before my septum outgrew the outside of my nose, and because it was going to, right, a preemptive nose job to prevent me from having to have the more complicated nose job, and the doctor had said, "Oh, we can't do this because it's not bad enough yet." I would have said, "Well, you've told me this is going to happen." Right? They didn't know that it was going to happen, so they couldn't do that. But if that was the case, yeah, you just let your nose grow normally, pretty soon you're going to have a circumstance where the fluid in your sinuses gets so compacted that it's going to make you pass out every time you stand up. Oh, well, then I better get this fixed before that happens, right? That's the way medical care, like, if you know this is going to happen, that's the way. Imagine if you showed up to your gyno with a breast tumor, and the gyno was like, "Well, it's not big enough yet. We can't do anything about it."
Yeah.
Right? Like, if pregnancy is going to be deadly for a person, they should be able to get tubal ligation. There's a no-brainer there. There's no reason for that to be the situation, and for people to put up with that situation and say, "Well, we need abortion," right? Like, that would be like saying, well, if we can't have the tumor removed and get chemo and radiation to treat this breast cancer, well, obviously women need the right to just have a double mastectomy whenever they want.
It's ridiculous. This is why there's so many fad diets, right?
Yeah.
Because women just can't. They need the easy way out. It's so much harder to do things the right way, right? They don't want that. It's just give me the quick pill, the quick fix. It's laziness. It is really off-putting.
And that's only to describe abortion as the easy way out. I mean, I would imagine having your tubes tied is perhaps more difficult than one abortion, but it doesn't stop at one abortion. You might need another abortion after that, and then another one after that, and an abortion may be simpler than a tube tying operation, but it's not exactly without its risks. Having an abortion can have some risks to a mother, and it's God knows how many abortions versus one equivalent of a vasectomy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And honestly,
a vasectomy for a man is much more risky than a tube tying operation for a woman, because a tube tying operation for a woman doesn't result in sperm swimming into the walls of your urethra and possibly causing all manner of autoimmune diseases. Right? I might have that wrong. I haven't looked into it, but as far as I know, a tube tying operation.
You literally trap the ova inside the ovaries, in the first part of the tube, and then they get absorbed, but there's not problems that come from that.
Yeah, and abortions can cause all manner of complications. They're quite rare, but like I said, it's one operation with possible complications versus
Yeah.
Several, as many
well,
operations
it depends
as it
on
takes
how your abortion is done, too.
to get rid of as many pregnancies as it takes,
right.
each with its own set of complications.
Yeah, abortion pills have side effects, and different complications can come from that. Other abortifacients have side effects that different complications can occur because of that. Surgical abortion has potential complications, and one of those potential complications is this. It's pretty much the same with any surgical procedure. If you get cut open, you are now at increased risk for infection. And because your skin is the biggest organ in your immune system. It's the biggest organ in your body. It's your first line of defense against like staph infections and stuff like that, right? So all of that, like if you're going to get some sort of a surgical procedure done, you definitely want one that doesn't have to be repeated over and over again. Rather than one that might have to be repeated again, or one that you might have to follow up with a medication that you need that might have side effects and so on. It seems like, to me, again, a no-brainer. If you definitely know for a fact that you do not want to ever get pregnant, remove the potential for getting pregnant. My mom, I keep going back to my mom because my mom's health was very complicated. She had during my brother's birth, they should have done a C-section and they didn't. And it was like a situation where they didn't know she needed a C-section until it was too late. And so she ended up with a detached uterus. Oof. And so just wait a minute for all of the ladies. There probably aren't very many ladies listening, but all
I don't even know what that means. But
well, you know what detached means.
But yeah, you guys can imagine what being kicked in the balls feels like. So I'm trying to imagine what that's like.
Well, let me put it this way: she wasn't conscious for a while after that, and she almost bled to death. And then the doctor said, because of your my mom was tiny. She was a tiny woman. Because of your size, because of your physique, there is no way to fix this. So you can't get pregnant again. And she did. And she almost died having a miscarriage. And the miscarriage was caused not by the issues with her body, but by an allergic reaction to a spider bite. And like my dad said, he sat in the hospital room with her while she was in treatment for the miscarriage, and just all of a sudden she hemorrhaged, and she looked dead. Her whole skin tone just disappeared, gone. Right, and that was when she consented to the full hysterectomy and everything, because she didn't want to do that. She had a sort of a idea that she would be less of a woman if she didn't have her uterus. And Dad kind of convinced her, well, you'll be a lot less of a woman if you're dead.
Yeah.
And that pretty much was it. One time almost dying from folly, and you give up the folly. And she never was any less of a woman without her uterus. But that was a situation, like that was back in 1975, 76, somewhere in there. And ever after, like my mom was of the opinion that if you need something done, you get it done. And a lot of people just don't understand that you don't want to go through something like that because you put off a medical procedure, or you chose a different medical procedure than the most effective one. But that's basically, in my opinion, I would compare using abortion as a substitute for less invasive, more effective ways of, preventing birth by preventing pregnancy instead of ending it. Less dangerous ways, it's dumb. It's idiotic. It's cutting your nose off to spite your face. And we have an entire movement, supposedly for women, working their butts off to convince women to do that. Why? Because they make money from it.
And because killing children is more important than protecting women.
Apparently.
On the off chance that those children might be male. And this might be an increasingly apt approach to this, because given the ultrasound abilities that we have nowadays, and how early you can tell the gender of a child, people can often tell if what they're having is a boy, and then go, oh well, I'll have an abortion now that I know. And it's so ironic that that people in a lot of fictional appraisals of these things, and a lot of non-fictional appraisals of these things, they sort of look at China and go, oh well, if they think they're having girls, then they'll just abort those children, and even though that's only because in China girls don't have to look after their parents and boys do. But
like legally they're required.
Yeah, that's the point. But in the West, it's a very different story. There is no such constraints on things, but nevertheless, women are increasingly likely to abort their children if they happen to be boys, for nothing but ideological reasons. And there's all kinds of articles that will highlight this, where women, once they find out they're having boys, will be like, oh, I don't want to bring a patriarchal, toxic misogynist into this world.
It's really heartbreaking.
All I can say about that.
It's really heartbreaking because everything about it is bad. It's bad that, we are discriminating against baby boys this way. It's bad that women are turning themselves into monsters this way. Because if you would kill someone for being male, you're just as much of a monster as if you would kill someone for being female. If you would kill someone because their birth doesn't suit your interests, you are making yourself a monster. And I'm sorry. I know that there are women who have regrets and that that understand later that what they did was wrong, and whose situation is a result of being lied to and manipulated and threatened and stuff like that. I don't care. Like there's a limit to the behavior that can be excused by all of that. At some point, you are responsible to put a stop to what's going on. Walk away from the people that are manipulating you, to turn on them, to ask for help, to get somebody else to help support you, to do the work, whatever it takes, to get another job, whatever it takes to ensure that you have the ability to do the right thing, to make sure that you are able to go forward and not commit an atrocity against another human being. Even if it means going through a pregnancy, giving birth, and then going through the pain of giving up custody of a child because you can't be a good parent. And I've said this before, I'm not talking about this from an outside perspective, right? I did the same level of carelessness, I did the same level of stupidity at 27 that we're usually talking about, the scared 17-year-old out of wedlock pregnancy. I did I can just take my birth control pills any time of day, when you actually know you have to take them the same time every day. Didn't pay attention to what I was doing, and left a window open of, yes, you can get pregnant right now. And that then I fortunately didn't have a miscarriage because of the pills. But that actually is a real serious issue, and it happens to a lot of women. because they're not careful. They're not meticulous. And it's why I tell women, if you ever want to be a mom, love your children enough before they're born to be as meticulous with their care as you would be after they're born. Love your children enough before they're conceived to be as meticulous with your planning, which is part of their care, as you would be planning their schedule. Like planning their school lunches. Plan your financial status to be prepared for that kid, and pay attention to what you're doing. Because when you fuck up, there's nothing you can do that will protect your child from 100% of the consequences. You can protect them from some of the consequences, but not all of them. And then you have to watch those consequences hit your child. And
yeah,
this
is something I never thought about until I met Lauren. And once I met Lauren, I was like, actually, yeah, I would rather raise it than kill it.
Yeah.
Because Lauren and I have discussed this once or twice before. Neither of us want children. We would both be devastated if it happened. But I think we both agree that if it did happen, we'd rather raise it than kill it. This is why we take, well, Lauren takes extra precautions.
Yeah, there's only a limited number of precautions available to you.
Yeah. But and I've, for my entire life, for as long as I've even known how the reproductive system works, I've been like, I absolutely do not want children under any circumstances. But like I said, it wasn't until I met Lauren where I was like, okay, I still really, 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 really don't want children, but if it happens, I'm gonna deal with it.
Yeah,
and I think Lauren's the same. And that's how you have to go into it. You can take all the precautions in the world, but you do have to envisage that scenario,
Yeah, and this is one of those things that we don't emphasize this enough to our youth. Like, so you have an understanding of it. I have an understanding of it. Like most of the people in the men's rights movement have an understanding of it. But if you try to talk to people outside the movement about it, they don't view it as protecting your children and protecting yourself from the pain of making horrible decisions on behalf of your children, right? They don't view it that way. They don't understand what they're looking at because they've been programmed with a lot of bullshit, a lot of propaganda that makes it all about women's convenience. And what we have is a society that treats the right to convenience as a real thing, but only for women. And honestly, like, there is no right to convenience. There is no human right to convenience. Things are hard in life, and that's just life. And it's fair for things to be hard. And it's even fair for things to be harder for some people than for others, believe it or not. There's no natural right for things to be easy. Right? If that happens, you're lucky. That's great. But nobody's done something to you because your life is different naturally than somebody else's. And unfortunately, we've got women feeling victimized by nature. And we've got women treating their babies as the perpetrators and demanding that men, again, making demands of men, that men make up for it. And in fact, one of the things they're fighting for now, and have been fighting for, is taxpayer-funded abortion. And by taxpayer, we mean men. Because men are the only people, effectively, who pay taxes. And so So this last paragraph we're going to read under abortion care, we'll get to the gender affirming thing next week. With multiple states implementing or proposing full abortion bans, in some cases with criminal penalties for individuals who provide or facilitate abortion access. Which, how the hell do you enforce a ban if you don't penalize providing access to the banned thing? In some cases, or those states that do allow abortion health care services are seeing their networks further strained by new and desperate patients seeking care from neighboring states. So women haven't lost access to abortion, it's just been moved. Many fear criminalization for their abortion or pregnancy loss due to a lack of health data privacy on their phones or devices. So I'm going to say this. I don't feel sorry for anybody who is complaining about a lack of health data privacy at all. If you're complaining about that because of abortion, fuck you. Right? I've watched people deal with a lack of health data privacy because of pain care for 30 years. More than 30 years, 40 years. Because I was 10 when a car accident drew my mother's attention to her healthcare situation. And, I had a family member who was an addict, and it was because his medical team was careless with him in regard to using narcotics to treat some very profound health conditions, and he probably also had Ehlers-Danlos, and we didn't know it. And they didn't monitor what they were doing, and they gave him too much and all kinds of stuff. And I could give you his whole story, but it's really gruesome. But the relevant part is he was once put in jail for having different doctors to treat different health conditions. Literally none of them, except for his pain clinic, were providing pain medicine. But he was accused of something called doctor shopping. So what doctor shopping is supposed to be is if you go to Dr. A and you get Darvocet, and you go to Dr. B and you get morphine, and you go to Dr. C and you get methadone, and all that, right? You're using access to different doctors to get more pain medicine than you're legally supposed to have, right? He wasn't doing that. He was going to a kidney specialist to treat kidney failure. He was going to a gastroenterologist for the short version of this is he had, due to a medical accident, had the most extreme version of bariatric surgery. Before bariatric surgery was really a thing, he didn't have a stomach at all. And so he had to go to a gastroenterologist or die. And then he had his general practitioner who saw him if he got the flu and gave him his flu shots and stuff like that. And then he went to the pain clinic for everything else. Like, well, he had treatment for diabetes as well. But everything else was, if he got medication prescribed, they had the whole list. They had to look at the whole list to make sure they weren't giving him something that was going to have a bad interaction and all that stuff, right? So a prosecuting attorney went through his medical records, claimed that was doctor shopping, had him convicted for illegal drug use, even though he wasn't taking any more than the legal amount, and put him in rehab. Not once, but 4 times. To rehabilitate his use of the medical profession to treat his complicated health conditions. Which were caused by the medical profession.
My understanding of the dissolution of Roe v. Wade is if women want to travel to a different state to have abortions, they can. Can men travel to a different state to absolve themselves of their
no
of their obligations to the eventualities of a pregnancy. They can't, right? The federal government will continue to track them down, right?
Yeah, no, nope, they can't. In fact, you can't really even get away with leaving the country. Like, you leave the country, you can get extradited now.
Depending on what country you go to, I guess.
Yeah. If you speak other languages, you have a better chance of getting away. But of course, if you leave the country, that means you have to leave everything behind. You don't get to, like, you can, if Ohio has completely banned abortion, and a woman in Ohio wants an abortion and she travels to Michigan to get one, she can come back to Ohio afterwards and get on with her life. Like, she doesn't have to stay in Michigan for the rest of her life in hiding and never set foot in Ohio again in order to avoid arrest and prosecution. So there's a big difference even then. But yeah, there's no equivalent for men. There's no equivalent for men to abortion. There's no equivalent for men to safe haven abandonment. And a lot of women will argue that men can use safe haven abandonment, but that's bullshit, because it's used in unwed situations where the single mother is supposedly scared and doesn't feel like she can be a good mother, but doesn't want to go through the adoption system for whatever reason. Maybe she doesn't know who the father is, whatever. So she drops the baby off in a safe location rather than in a dumpster. And that's why we have safe haven abandonment, because young women will dump their babies off in unsafe places and let them die from exposure and animal attacks and other horrifying things, right? But only women have custody at birth in that situation. The father doesn't have custody at birth. So if she chooses not to do safe haven abandonment, if she chooses to raise the child and demand child support, he has no recourse. He can't go get the child and take the child to a safe haven abandonment place and not get accused of kidnapping. And so she has those two options. And then if she says she wants to adopt, opt for adoption, and the father's like, no, you can't, I won't sign off on it, then he really has no recourse to argue against child support. If he wants custody, and the judge doesn't give him custody, he's screwed in terms of, well, obviously you forced this woman to parent this child, even though actually she just fought you for custody, so now you have to pay. Right? So, yeah, men don't have an equivalent. They don't have anything near an equivalent. And women don't face anything like the knowledge that your child is born into the custody of somebody who is averse to your welfare. Right? And averse to your parenting rights. Women face nothing like that. We have custody at birth. It's very uncommon for that to be taken away. And if anybody does want to take custody away from us, they have to fight for it. Like, we have all the cards. We don't even know what it's like to be in that situation where not only are you not close to your kid, you don't have access to your child, you can't provide care, and you can't make decisions regarding your child's welfare, but the person who does hates you. Like, it's a terrifying prospect. And most women don't ever experience anything like that.
On that cheery note, should we
yeah.
How long have we been going?
I've missed a couple of super chats, and I've been kind of offhand looking for them, and I can't freaking find them. So I'm sorry, guys. They're definitely going to be. I'll have to read them in the next show. I no longer can get into the other system we use for seeing those, but and they're like right in the middle. So hopefully they'll show in the sidebar after the live stream is over. Going back and looking at earlier parts of the live stream doesn't show earlier chat until after it's posted.
You might have to wait until next Thursday.
Yep, next Thursday I'll have to do what I did this Thursday and read.
We're going back to 2014 when all we had was a Thursday show.
Yeah.
Before Brian came in and turned it into 5 shows a week.
Yeah, we might. But yeah, that's so the situation is there will be, if I've missed your super chat, that's why. The system that I look at only lets me go back so far, which irritates me, but there's not anything I can do about it. So, with that, we do have one from Albert Nader Retro. Gave us $5 Canadian and said just watched a Brett Cooper video called My Biology Is Not Your Costume. She reveals she's a Handmaid's Tale fan. Disappointing to learn she hates men. Well, that's sounds like a radical feminist. I don't know who Brett Cooper is. Senior Sticks gave us $5 and said men have rights, women privileges under the law. Men are worked for and maintained. Men's rights are worked for and maintained. Privileges are given as a gift. And I would even expand that. Men have some rights and a lot of responsibilities under the law. Women have privileges, and I can't name a single responsibility we really have. Like, even when we pay taxes, the money is spent on us.
You have a responsibility to be feminists, to walk in lockstep with the feminist agenda.
I'm in trouble then.
Exactly.
That's why they hate me.
You don't have that privilege because you don't walk in lockstep with it.
Yeah, I refuse. I will never do that. I hate feminism. I don't like the victim narrative, and I don't like the hatred. And there you go.
How dare you?
Yep.
How dare you?
Very, very carefully. And we have somebody who explained Brett Cooper. I don't know if Brett Cooper is a normie. She did mention she thought feminism was necessary for equality way back in. Okay, she might be one of those. Because, like, feminism was never necessary. Ever. There was reform necessary, but it wasn't gendered, and gendering it screwed things up for 2 centuries, and we're still on the wrong path, and when we have to recover, we're going to have hell to pay. NobaFan21 gave us $1 and said, Number 1, so women will be legally forced to pay child support for a child that wasn't hers, just like men? Sounds great to me. Yeah, that's a really rough one. Like, women face nothing like that either, because, like, we know whether or not we are the mother. We always know that. Unless, you gave birth in a coma. And then you might not know because you weren't awake and you might not have been. Like, I don't remember anything that happened to my body when I was in a coma. I remember hearing the television and conversations of people outside of the little no place where I was aware. Like, if you have somebody that's close to you that's in a coma and you're visiting them, and like, they may not feel you holding their hand, but they may very well hear everything you say. That's just the one thing that I can tell you, and they'll remember it. And in a lot of instances, unless they're in the coma long enough that it causes damage. But yeah. Let's see, then we have Super Chows to look for. And that'll be it. Come on, Discord. Discord's like, oh, you want to use me? I'm going to freeze now. I'll look at it on the other computer. This is why I have 2 computers. This is why I'm using 2 computers. I have more than 2 computers. Scroll. We have a lot of chats. There we go. Super Chow channel. All right. Where's the done? All right. Well, these are from. So I don't know. Okay, these are from the Velma discussion, and I'm pretty sure they were already read. And
the less said about that shit, the better.
Okay, so today at 7:41, I'll read this one. That's where it starts. Meredith G gave us $5 and said, "Honey for the Badgers. Thanks for the great conversation." And then we have Miga, M-I-G-A. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's not Miga. Gave us $5 and said, "When the germs enter the body, they're not bringing their best." Oh, yes, they are. They're bringing disease, viruses, and toxins. We need to build a great, big, beautiful skin. Make immunity great again. So, yeah, I like that. That was cool. And Zapier, I do see the thing that you say not to read out loud, just so you know I did see it. And I'll forward it to Allison. Aside from that, I think that's everything. But yeah, in terms of germs, you guys have no idea. There's some scary shit going on thanks to overzealous use of antibiotics and underzealous use of hand washing and other means of avoiding transmitting germs between people in healthcare facilities. So there are germs that are not just immune to most antibiotics. There are some germs now that are completely immune to all types of antibiotics, and we can't keep up with how fast they're building that immunity. And like, I have a theory on what would work better, but I don't believe anybody's ever gonna do that. So
ironically, it's not viruses we have to worry about, it's germs.
It's bacteria. Yeah. And they have come up with a way to fire essentially a biological missile at chemicals that we use to kill them that chemically reacts with the substance and destroys it on a molecular level, turning it into something not poisonous to the bacteria and water. And so we had to come up with medications that attack that biological weapon that the germs are firing inside of our bodies at our drugs to neutralize it so that the drugs will work on the bacteria. So it's literally like a hot war.
Sooner or later, they're going to come up with a germ that can eat plastic, which sounds good on an environmental level, but in reality it means we are so fucked.
Yeah.
So very fucked, folks. Watch this space.
Yeah, just if you really want to be terrified, look up CRE resistant or CRE bacteria. It's a particular type of chemical resistance in the bacteria, and you'll see what I just described. And honestly the only way for somebody in our in Rumble, Okinawi says, "Jesus, they really are like alien invaders." And well, yeah, they're treating us like an alien environment, an inhospitable alien environment. So they really are like alien invaders. And there's only two ways for us to solve this problem. One of them is to have a native population that will fight them off. And the other one is to figure out a way to have a symbiotic relationship with them. Because we can't kill them fast enough. And every time we figure out new ways to kill them, they figure out ways to neutralize those ways that we are killing them. So, there you go. So, like, my theory is that the only viable way to win the war on germs is to cultivate a native population, a native flora within our bodies that will defend us. Which kind of makes you think, you know, are we the planet that isn't being saved? And with that, which kind of makes It brings abortion into a whole new light, too. With that, I will thank my two co-hosts for being part of the long, wandering, and oddly shaped sausage. Thanks to everybody for listening to the odd, wandering, and oddly shaped sausage. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.